I am about to let Tommy G into main stage and actually do a very exciting handover. What's up, Tommy? Welcome to the Global Unity Summit. Looking very suave today.
Yes, I thought I'd behave and, dress appropriately.
A collared shirt, yeah.
Yeah, a collar.
I was loving how much you enjoyed the term corporation, and I think that would be a really great place to begin to introduce you as I do this handover. Tommy was a corporate superstar and now has reformed, found the light side, and is working with us on this mission of awakening the world through love and light and freedom. Most importantly, I think, for you, Tommy, one of my total favorite humans, and I'm so excited that you are going to be moderating this next panel. So without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to you so you can introduce our panelists, and let's get this epic panel on heart-based leadership going.
Absolutely. My God, after the last few days, like today, I feel like we could talk for hours, but we've only got one. So I'm going to try and keep it tight and on message, but I'm going to co-moderate this with you, actually, Nicole.
Okay.
And we're going to do a discovery. So there's going to be questions on both sides. We're in the green room. We're already on fire. In the green room, right? So we better switch this on. Luke was saying, "Don't let all the juice go. Let's go." So anyway, some intros. So let's get some intros happening. So ladies first. So it's Julie. Julie is a all about heart-led leadership, and Julie is co-founding director of OPP Australia. And she's a dedicated collaborative community builder, emphasising sustainable conversation, social enterprise, and collective entrepreneurial success. Julie has a rich history of client-centred, value-based relationships and has breathed life into pioneering business innovation, creative leadership, and living systems ecology in almost for her whole working life. Julie founded her original mentoring practices almost 30 years ago with the Presence of Now, specialising in individual collaboration transformation, it's a bit to get up, spiritual mentoring, and working with organisation and entrepreneurial executives to build social awareness and leadership, or we could do a lot more of that, and capabilities, all while fostering healthier inward lives for a better communion with one another and more truth-filled conversations which serve all life. So that's Julie. So I reckon we can bring Julie in, and then I'm going to introduce Luke, who's a powerhouse. Okay. Hey, Julie, I know you don't like intros, so we read this while you weren't quite there yet, but I got it out so everybody knows what you're about, all the amazing stuff you've done. So welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me. This will be fun. This will be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be big. Okay, so we next have Luke Kohen, heart-led leadership strategy session as well here. As we know, Luke is a speaker, heartist, I love that word, mentor and ecopreneur. I love the way he invents words. Solutionary is one of his others, which I think is awesome. With over a decade of experience empowering individuals and groups, he also serves as mentor for emerging leaders, founders, and change agents. Deeply passionate about bridging the gap between social entrepreneurship and environmental activism, he has been a strategist for forging new models of collaboration and innovation, where the meeting of universal spirituality, holistic business, awesome, whole systems change, and community building all converge. Wow, this is going to be awesome. Welcome, Luke.
Brother Luke, I'm so happy
Eventually
that he is joining us today from Bali. What's up?
He is coming from, was it Balifornia? I think it was, Nicole. Okay. And hey, Nicole, I don't think anybody's introduced you, for the...
Hopefully, my presence has introduced me over the past few days, and if it hasn't, I'd say there's a bit of work to do there. But
right, okay. So perhaps we'll dive straight in. Everyone knows who you are. This is your crew, right? This is your gang, your tribe. So welcome, Luke.
Luke, this is great. This is a great collective to be having this conversation. This really, yeah.
All right.
Welcome, Luke.
So, all right, guys. So let's kick off. When I was preparing to have this discussion with everybody, and this is going to be an all-round fireside. We can all ask each other questions. This is a discovery session, I think. I realized, having been a corporate survivor, or corporation, surviving the corporation, or the corporate penitentiary, as I used to call it, that was, of course, all in my mind because I'd been programmed and conditioned and educated to head down that path of what we believed. This is all about beliefs, success. Being on the other side of it, it took a health wake-up call for me to jump to the other side, as you alluded to, Nicole, and wake up and look at what's happening in health, education, the food industry, anything with an industry that was all about making dollars. And that's what we were programmed to feel, a lack around pursuing the dollar. I did that for 28 years of my life. And not until I let go of that and started to discover, because my ego had been smashed up against the rocks a couple of times, that I started to let go and let my heart come into what I was doing. But I also always had this heart type approach within what I was doing in business. Now, when you look at some of the numbers, and this is what my colleagues, ex-colleagues that I used to work with, where I had a lot of transactional relationships, still love a lot of the people that are in there. There are people on the edge that want to come out, and there are some that have come out. Doesn't mean they have to necessarily leave their employ, but I think the way they look at life and how they interpret life and coming from here is going to make a big difference for them. So I'm pretty passionate about seeing how much we can deliver today that can help some people take one step forward on that purpose. So finally, to give some final context, and then we're going to open it up. When you look at a lot of the data that we get hit with in the corporate world, if you believe Gallup, they're one of the big ones that are highly respected. They're saying 79% of the workforce, this is just business, so we're talking here broadly about organizations, but just talking about the workplace, are disengaged. That, when I saw that figure, that was sad. That's phenomenal. That's a pretty soulless existence in my view. And I think with that current background, I want to make it more of a background, and hoping on this call, we're going to be able to create some foreground as to how to get there. So first question, and I'm going to leave this to anybody that wants to kick off. Let's level set on what we mean by heart-led leadership. Who wants to take that first?
I nominate Brother Luke to open that conversation up.
I will respond to your invitation. Yeah, I've had a long journey, and I never really self-identified as a leader. My mentor said, a leader is someone who leads himself, right? And I can relate to your story, brother, because I also had a healing crisis, but mine was quite early. It was at 22, and when I got on my sort of path of addressing those issues and having my sort of shift in culture, community building became a big focus. Like once I started getting some keys for me, it was community, and a lot of it was trial and error. It was just kind of just going for it and learning through trial and error, which is not a really fun way to learn in leadership, where you just kind of make a lot of mistakes, but it was heart-led from the start. It was like, oh, this is bigger than me. People need community, and we'll figure it out. So almost opposite spectrum of the corporate world. It was very in the transformational festival sort of arena. It was before I got into entrepreneurship. So my journey into heart-led leadership started in a heart-based culture, which was focused on connection as the foundational piece. And I translate it later on in my journey into impact entrepreneurship and philanthropy and all these other arenas. I saw the gap that both sectors had. The sort of transformational festival, holistic culture world was missing some really grounded, professional, alignment pieces around, okay, there's good to have some structure. It's good to have some pieces that, create accountability for showing up on time, things like that. And then, in the corporate side, there's a huge gap of intimacy, of real heart coherence, of really knowing the person you're working with story, just even knowing they're like who they actually are, right? And so, how do we bridge that gap? So that's kind of, for me, the inquiry into heart-led leadership is, I think that this integrated approach now is, how are we going from game A to game B? What is heart-led leadership in this new paradigm? And I would say heart-based leadership now it has to come from a foundation of deep personal responsibility, right? Like, it's not enough to just be in the love and light of the heart. There has to be a foundation of personal responsibility in order to be. So like, you take the heart base, we can unpack that. You can take the leadership and unpack that, right? So as we bring these two words together, like, what are the foundational elements of that mythos? And I would say personal responsibility would be foundational for me in terms of defining this word and how we give it meaning.
Right, awesome. Well, look, I mean, it's really interesting. And Julie, I'm going to get you to answer the same question. But to your point there, the struggle becomes when you're stuck in that corporate environment, there's a cross-purpose thing that happens because there are these goals that are imposed on you, right, to have to deliver on for the business. And that can go cross-purpose with following a heart-led approach to what you believe should be happening and for the goodness of your people and for the goodness of your customers. So it's a tough place to be. You're almost forced to lie to your spiritual being,
It's a great piece that you're bringing, and I'm excited to hear Julie's perspective on this. Just to touch point on that, I think how we can open this up to even deeper nuances is, like you said, how do we do this in a new way and it still be effective, right? Because people out there don't want to compromise their business, but they also don't want to compromise their soul anymore. And this is that journey from game A to game B. We're creating new paradigm business, new paradigm leadership. So what does heart-based leadership look like in the new paradigm? We have to create some context around that journey, around that. What does that game B arena even look like, right? How do we create massive impact and wealth on the planet without it coming from an extractive model or a dominating model, right? What does it actually look like? And that cross section of having community, having intimacy in the workplace, having a culture that's heart-based, but with a level of professionalism and precision and etiquette that actually moves the ball forward, that's emerging right now. That hasn't been done quite yet. And so we're in the innovative stage of actually embodying and developing what heart-based leadership even looks like on the planet. It just hasn't existed in that way. When it did, it was in these very sort of niche categories that don't really apply to the mainstream or the masses. But I think now the whole collective is in this culture change and this consciousness shift. So we need to unpack the full context of what this means and what this is. So I pass it over to Julie to take us another step deeper into this.
Thank you. It's really interesting listening that, because of my experience from being on high level leadership from a really, really young age, from those early 20s, I was of the era where we were learning organizations. So there was actually a lot of heart. All good leaders have heart and they operate from heart. It's innate in them. They're natural with it. And then what I watched is the demise of the leadership realm, right? Of course, there was the corporate psychopathy and it was given so much attention. And the other got HR influenced, become very bureaucratic, very policy driven, and telling leaders how they have to be and how they have to act. And HR determines a culture. And HR is an employee. So they don't even think like leaders. So there again, you've ripped out the heart of an organization where the leader who comes naturally with heart is unable to mirror it, is unable to bring the culture because it's literally handing it over. And so a few years ago, when we decided we were going to take our work back into organizations after all of those healing protocols and wholeness and being able to stay really, really embodied, and looking up through heart, not necessarily just from heart. So when you're looking up through heart, you're holding both of them. You're holding them both out here, and you're observing from a really, really, really powerful, intelligent space. And when you're able to do that, you're actually able to connect with those good leaders that have always been around. So what was missing is the heart in product development, the heart in the strategies, the heart the minute you start doing spreadsheets, right? The minute you start doing financials, you go, okay, what does that look like inside? So I'm hearing the word in this new paradigm. We've got to have heart leadership. What is the new paradigm? Why don't we define that first rather than saying it has to be here?
Yes, please.
As though we're creating some miracle
Yeah,
that's never been there before. I've been a heart leader for over 40 years, right? So what I didn't know is how to bring the power from within up. Right. So, yes, I unleashed potential. I had an amazing mind of helping startups, starting up VC companies, all sorts of things. Right. But what I didn't know is how to stay. Yes, I did yoga and I was an elite sports person I managed a money market in the daytime, and I did 3 years of sports medicine as a degree of a nighttime. Like, who does that, right? Other than I love to explore, not so much the question, who am I, but what makes me tick, right? Not what anybody else thinks that is. What's this? What is this power that stays, that's this entity, this beingness, and this potential? And then once I got out of the me part and then went, well, what if we're being it together? What does that look like? Which is beyond the trauma aspect, which we'll bring in now, beyond the trauma aspect where, because we all know beyond that is this story, is this beautiful strength that emerges. So there are those that will have to go through that pathway, and there will be those like us who just go, let's go over here and let's run with that. What does that look like? Let's throw some pressure on that. Let's not be cowardice about this. So what if language isn't perfect to start off with? We're going to be shaky to start off with. The vulnerability of stepping into a voice that is, I'm an enabler. So I'm usually behind the scenes. I'm behind the rock stars or behind the leaders that go, you can do this. And they'll text me at 2 a.m. and go, I've got to do this speech. You can do this, right? So no one knows that, right? I can be in a room where I've been a mentor to at least 30% or 40% of no one knows, because I don't have that relationship. It's not me being a mentor and someone being a mentee. They're not lesser than me,
This is a huge piece. This huge piece of
thank you,
of defining leadership. You're a legend, by the way. I love hearing you and feeling you. Just really feel the embodiment of what you're transmitting in your life experience. Leadership is not about the position and being validated as a leader. What you just said was like the primary data chain, the ones that are behind the scenes, making it happen, whether they get the cookie at the end of the day or not. The ones that are leading, they lead out of necessity from life moving through them. Yep. And I love that you said leaders are naturally heart driven. That's what a true leader actually is. Let's redefine what a leader actually is, but that's, I love, so you touched on trauma, you touched on, what is the new paradigm? I love if we can land dart what is the new paradigm. And then also this piece around, I just needed to name it, just to echo the truth of what you said around. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs out there wanting to be leaders, but it was more chasing significance. It was more being validated in that position and being positioned as a leader than the authenticity of leading. And the people that are in the background are the ones I always pay attention to, because those are the ones that are really, really holding it down. And then some of us that are, I do the same. I have, people I support, and I'm in the background. No one would ever know the role or impact that I've had in that way visibly. And I've I feel satisfied with life in that, because I know that the truth of what's emerged, and I have roles where I'm asked to be visible, to be in that role. It's not always necessarily like fulfilling or exciting in certain ways. You do take more risks, you can take more projections, you can take more shots when you're in that role of leader, and really meeting teams and communities to be at the front of it. So Nicole, what's the new paradigm, sister? What is the new paradigm?
From the middle-aged millennials to
Right.
the millennials.
Let me be the voice, the defining definition.
There we go. The future.
Right.
Nicole, what's the
Bring
future?
it. Let's go.
Well, in Love Out Loud's term, it's the actualization of a civilization of love. And then the way that we defining that is this ongoing exploration. I mean, we've chosen the word civilization intentionally because a civilization requires not just philosophical frameworks and values-based frameworks and conceptual frameworks, it requires infrastructure. And what I hear when you're talking, Luke, and Julie, in your own way as well, we're saying this, it's the marriage of these two types of being and tracks that have been developed in their individuality, like very heart-led, community-based way of living. And then, very corporate, goals-driven, outcome-focused, that really has become the foundation of our economy. How do we bring these two things together? And what I sort of see, I guess, in my mind and my vision is, well, it's so much of it comes back to asking the right questions and asking a holistic series of questions from the beginning, and it's, I don't want to oversimplify it either, because also what I hear in what you're sharing, Luke, is leadership is not glamorous. Like, let this be known. A leader is asking all the time, what does my mission need? Not what do I need to feel significant? Who do I need to become? And it's a constant process of becoming. And I think naturally, if you're a heart-based leader, the nature of love is to always give you what you need, not what you want. So if you marry this concept of love with this concept of leadership, both are demanding you to become something that is very unknown and very uncomfortable to you in all moments.
Yes,
all the
they
time,
need to be.
constantly. And I think in order to build infrastructure inside the context of a civilization that has foundational philosophical frameworks of love and compassion, it's going to require huge amounts of discomfort because of the different dynamics that need to come together and learn how to cooperate with one another. The only real way that I can find peace in that is to sort of look to the example of life itself and ponder, and observe and admire and be, filled with awe that life itself has so many different trillions and trillions and trillions of components that somehow manage to exist in perfect harmony in this present moment.
Yeah.
And so if nature can demonstrate this, surely we can find it within ourselves to put aside this perception of difference and find our own way of harmonizing.
Fantastic. Wow.
And the key,
awesome.
And the key you just said, Nicole, excuse me talking over, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. The key you just said is setting yourself aside. Stop. We when we really set ourselves aside, we actually stop asking questions. What do I need? Like, how do I become a better leader? That just doesn't ever get asked again. It's literally in that space of, you was just saying, Nicole, this coalescing of this perfect event that's about to produce itself. And when we're listening from that real undercarriage, it's embedded in the DNA of the organization, right? It's embedded into the DNA of the leadership idea, right? And it's just an idea. At the end of the day, it's just an idea, right? Really? And it's what we're able to go, so what does this moment need? Like this, we were talking about this the other day, more and more of the more the song builds, the more that we're co-producing and we're co-collaborating, and the minute we recognize our egos are popping in, and we'll know because our head starts hurting. We literally start getting a headache where, whoa, we're using our head instead of our whole being, absolutely. And we feel it, and we either push through it, which is guaranteed disaster.
Desensitize ourselves. Let's just preface that. We
desensitize
ourselves to handle it. We
Yeah.
drink
Yep.
alcohol at the end of every workday. We smoke cigarettes. We, whatever the numbing effect is, this is because you are so out of balance that you have to do those things just to cope within your environment. I just want to preface that, because if there's someone that is doing that in order to survive in their environment, that is a massive indicator that you are not in harmony and coherence in your own life path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, having been
I
in
don't
that.
want to cut Julia.
Sorry.
I didn't want to cut Julia. I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Was there, and it'd be regularly. It's part of the culture. And free drinks as well. The organization's paying for it. What the heck? You're traveling and you're with your mates, in the battlefield, trying to earn an extra buck, get an extra win. Did you close that deal? And that's to numb it out. You had to numb out to survive because it was painful. I mean, we've got GABA happening basically in the brain, right? To help settle you down there. But that juxtaposition of pursuing the goal is that left brain disconnecting heart we're going to drive through. And, as Luke was saying, and you were alluding to as well, Julie, it's that connecting into the team, leading from behind, I think was where kind of Luke was coming from as well. We heard the other day, Kelly talking about leadership is not a position of power. These are positions of power. But when you're leading, that's a different game. Now, here's what's in it for business. If we kind of pace in to kind of lead, the benefit for business is they say that, okay, well, the leaders are responsible 70% of the time to be able to change the situation, and hence the opportunity for heart-led leadership. So they are a big part of the solution. The other part is that there's 23% extra profitability sitting on the table if you're leaving love on the table. So that's connecting back into the old system. Of course, we have an old system there as well, right? Which is, another discussion topic. So how do we now, in identifying what the challenge is, how do we now start to move towards changing it? So I don't know who wants to pick that up in sort of coming up with, being a solutionary, Luke. Maybe you want to kick this one off first on how you go about advising some pretty amazing people. I've seen the reviews to going that next level, bringing their heart in, which is at the end of the day going to benefit their business, their family, their life, getting them connecting to their truth and taking that vulnerable step.
So I'm not sure if I heard the prompt fully. Maybe if you could just restate it as a simple prompt. Yeah.
Simple question.
Yeah.
How do we help people getting from that state, and the one that Nicole was talking about, and moving more towards being heart-led?
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on two things before I lead into that from what I've heard that kind of, I get these little pings, and what I'm hearing is in the new paradigm, everyone's a leader.
Yeah.
In the new paradigm, everyone is leading because they're doing what's necessary for life and they're not making it about them. They're leading because they're moving themselves forward. How do we get there? Is the question. What is the process of what is the bridge out of that state of coping mechanisms and numbing and I think it's really important to frame, we all do this in different ways. There's the societally accepted sort of social norms of coping, and then there's just what people's nervous systems are doing because we're human beings, in bodies. So we all have coping strategies. It's not always externalized through addiction or it can be how we think. We can have strategies of disassociation without having to ever use a substance. People can just kind of float a little bit, right? So coping mechanisms are just different strategies of how we manage reality as little ones, right? And what for a new paradigm from my perspective, is we take the journey into spiritual maturity as a civilization. What does that mean? That means the soul has to come online fully. That means, what does that mean? It means that the personality or those survival mechanisms are no longer the main driving force of our choices. So I would take a step deeper from heart-based to soul-informed culture, soul-informed environment, soul-informed relating. Once we're committed and have accessed that soul-based consciousness, it takes over. It snowballs. We can't go back to what we already saw. Once you see it, you're like, oh my God, that's why I do that. This comes from this trauma. You know, this is where my soul wasn't leading. It was where my soul wasn't leaving. It was in the background. At some point, the soul comes to the foreground of your experience, and there's no turning back. You know, and you go through those really uncomfortable initiations of having to shed identity structures that were out of date. We have to shed these, you know, ways of coping with trauma and actually get with and meet and grieve and meet the trauma fully so that we can transform. So the trauma that's on the planet, there are obviously varying degrees and percentages, varying lineage. We all have it. If you're in a human body, welcome to the human race. You have trauma in your nervous system. It's okay. It's let's normalize the understanding that trauma exists. That's part of the new culture. Okay, we all got trauma. What do we do? Well, what are we doing about it? Right?
Yeah.
How are we addressing it? And is there a space in community, in the workplace for the trauma-informed conversations, for trauma awareness? Because the end game or the long game, right? You know, profit at all costs is going to bring us into a very unfavorable earth. We know. We don't need to go into statistics around how bad shit can get if, you know, we don't course correct, right? So what is the course correction? The soul-based consciousness actually holds the blueprint for the solutions. It's not a mental construct. It's not a philosophical idea that is emerging from the minds of man. It's in the fabric of creation itself. It is pre-colonial, it is indigenous, it is ancient, and it is futuristic all at the same time. And we have to learn to be entrained into that vibration on a soul level, and then begin to shed the identities that are between that awareness on a sort of vibrational spiritual level, and where it meets, where the rubber hits the road. And where the rubber hits the road is resolving the trauma. When the trauma resolves, new choices are made, new identities form, new behaviors form. If you don't address the identity, the behaviors will not change. And addressing the identity means meeting the really yucky stuff that's hidden underneath that identity, which is it's not glamorous, right? So what is the new paradigm? What is new civilization? A bunch of spiritual adults taking self-responsibility for their trauma. So the ego and the personality is not running the show, but the soul is.
Damn. So as we cross that, I mean, that's awesome. Getting to that state to realize that it's almost like you got to be smashed up against the rocks a few times to then start to realize that where the ego, I guess, detaches or lets go. Obviously, the solution
cannot hold on anymore in its desperate attempt to get.
It's too painful. It's just become. There's only so many gin martinis you can have, right? And you know, being a relationship expert myself, having been divorced twice, you know, there's things there that I've had to learn about. You know, married to work or married also married. I mean, but touching on same stuff, right? So yeah, Julie, over to you.
Well, I'm going to be a bit of the naughty girl here. I can't help myself. I have to.
Go for it.
I was told I was allowed to be like this.
Naughty's good.
I spoke exactly like you did, Luke, 28 years ago, and now I don't. I won't talk trauma. There is a movement inside the new paradigm that needs to do the trauma process, that needs to go through the tribal aspect, that needs to dive deep into it. But I'm also aware the role I play is people that are getting stuck on the trauma addiction, the people that are starting to indulge in it. And that's when I come in and grab them by the collar and go, right, enough.
Yes.
Right? Now be the leader, right? Now be the leader. I've got no objection to the transformational model and trauma model, but I definitely, it's building this narcissistic obsession with, rather than it being built in our everyday, every moment capability of, like, literally me right now, an awareness, where's my breath? Is it inside my body? Is my field up in my chest still, right? So when I'm aware and I'm listening to the capabilities of my body, I'm not involved with the trauma. So if we get involved in the trauma, we become the trauma, and we repeat it and repeat it, and we send out those vibes over the universe, and all this head stuff just traps the planet. And it's time. There's enough of us now. I've helped so many leaders through the awakening process. I've been involved with business that have been doing Heart Leaf, New Paradigm, and Capitalism 4.0 for many, many years. And if I don't keep adding this voice, and I keep sitting on the sidelines while people keep saying we've got to go into trauma, I'm doing a disservice to this collective by not speaking up. I'm a bit nervous about speaking up right now, but for some reason, that's because there's some gold trying to speak itself through all of us, and not using the same old language.
We're here for it. I'm here for it, and I would love to unpack that and kind of, it's kind of like a yes and, right? So
yeah,
I think this is a worthy piece to me, because I would clarify there's two sides of this piece, where there's like the addiction to shadow work and the trauma looping, versus like what does it mean to actually resolve it in the nervous system so that you are more regulated in the way that you say.
yeah,
And I think there is a sort of phenomena of spiritual narcissism, where people are just working on themselves, working on themselves, and they're never actually stepping into their dharma and their mission, because they want to be healed first. And it doesn't work that way either. So I think there may be some shared reality that we actually have, and it just
for sure
might be a little bit of unpacking it to find where is it, what I actually mean when I speak into these things, because there's a part of me that speaks to it from my core energetics background as a therapist. There's a part of me that speaks to it from, the more of the just initiatic path, like not the occult isn't for everyone, but trauma is a universal understanding. That's something that we can all have empathy for, right? So it's not like everyone needs to do cathartic work all the time, and that's going to magically transform everything, because we can get lost in that work. It's kind of a yes and. We need both. We need ecstasis,
totally.
like
Absolutely.
these peak experiences that tap us into our soul, and we need communitas. We need that feeling of being in a unified field with each other and having a heart coherence in a shared field. And we need catharsis. We need to get the old epigenetic trauma firing different, so it's not in a holding pattern, because all the ideals in the world, all the love and light in the world of like this idealistic future utopia won't actually realize if the trauma doesn't get resolved. So we might have different approaches and understandings of what resolved trauma looks like. And I think that what you're saying is absolutely valid, that there are people that get looped. I've done it. I got like swirled in a little bit of like over processing shadow work at a stage. And, I've seen both, because there's the quantum healing side that I appreciate, and the lineages that I carry that are very deep in ancestral wisdom, and they have a very different understanding. They don't talk about trauma. They just pray. You're like, when you're praying, you're out of the way, and the prayer goes into the fire and up in the universe, and there's no you don't need to primal scream into a pillow to like make impact, right? So there's all these different modalities of what it means to progress as a soul and what it means to make impact. And I feel Nicole's challenge. She's like, I'm about to come in with something. I'm about to bridge the gap. So
I want to bridge the gap.
Bridge the gap. Synthesis.
And I'm gonna put a little cherry on the top too. But anyway, go Nicole.
Oh my God, do you want to do that first?
No. Your challenge, Nicole. I feel you.
Okay.
Please.
I think it's like, again, what's the question we're asking here? Because I think what this is really speaking to is, what is the state of our nervous system and its capacity to hold the vision that we're needing to bring forth, and I think one of the gifts that working specifically as an entrepreneur in mental health for so many years has shown me is the outcome or outcomes of severe self-orientation.
Yeah.
And I've seen it enough times to see very clearly that when there's an extreme amount of self-orientation, and I don't mean selfishness, and I don't mean bad intent, just the incapacity to transcend the limitation of self, being stuck in in the self is never the path to awakening, is never the path to joy, is never the path to really meet our true value in this world. It's actually through the generosity of spirit, the renunciation of self-orientation, you know, the surrendering to something bigger. And this is why we were speaking about it yesterday in one of the sessions, the desire to go to sports games, music festivals, to have these transcendent experiences where we're able to meet ourselves beyond the confines of the self, which includes, you know, the traumas, the pains that we hold, the part of us that wants to protect, because that's ultimately what it is, these blocks in the nervous system. I don't want to feel that pain again. I don't want to ever risk exposing a vulnerability because I don't feel equipped to move through that pain adequately. And how I've seen trauma affect people is when someone experiences a trauma, they don't have in that moment the emotional or cognitive access to be able to reconcile it. Fractured.
Absolutely.
But the invitation, the invitation when you align yourself to a mission, a vision. I mean, I the reason I'm like, you know, have so much passion for this conversation is this is how I achieved the impossible healing. You know, the survival of chronic, well, the mortality rate of chronic anorexia is 50%. 90% of people that have chronic anorexia go on to have a lifelong eating disorder. And so many components and impacts of that were really very medically unlikely. And so how did I heal that? You know, I threw myself so willingly because I was touched by the grace of the divine. I threw myself so willingly into a devotion that I was able to transcend the greatest cage I think one could ever live in, when the fixation becomes on a single thing every single day. The amount of calories I was eating in a day was all I thought about obsessively, to then being able to think expansively about changing the world, you know, like that. And it wasn't that all the trauma went away, but the directionality of my focus started to initiate me and guide me into a journey that inevitably has healed me, because I was invited to become the leader I needed to be in order to actualize that vision I saw for the world. And I think this is where these 2 points of the conversation often don't meet in communication, that you inevitably have these limitations. It's the hero's journey, the trauma.
But not everybody has to go on the hero's journey. This is the whole thing. When you've actually moved beyond the hero's journey, when you've literally let go of the ego's need to have this push-pull, then when you're in the breath, embodied in this particular moment, and you're really, really listening to the echo of the moment, not what I want to say, not what the ego wants to say, then everything else just falls away.
These things are synonymous though, as well, because the emerging through us is.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are 2 streams here.
Yeah.
And I've lived in both. 30 years, I haven't put a pharmaceutical in my body. Prior to that, I carried around a big pill and I healed myself of eczema, asthma, hay fever. So if you're talking about the stresses on the parasympathetic nervous system, I'm a master at that, right? And how the head played such a major role in, and that whole journey aspect, the ability to meet the confront, that aspect of what people want for these peak experiences, and altering the state of consciousness as we're moving. So rather than moving out of the past, the hero's journey is going, I'm here and I'm going there. And if I'm going to be on another train, I'm not going to be on another train with another people that are going, this is where we're going and this is where we're taking leadership. Sorry, I'm not going there. And I'm really clear about that. So it's the ability to say, it's here now. We are leading from the emerging future and bringing that, not from a place of trauma, not from that place of this is what it is. There's still going to be a lot of that, but not everybody has to do it. And we are doing the wrong thing by humanity to dictate that everybody in humanity has to go through that. Otherwise, they haven't had the awakening. Who are we to say that? That's a human arrogant approach to us. The ability to have a heart-led leadership means that we literally just drop it all. Let's just say leave everything we know at the door, right? Let's just throw it all out the window.
Life is going to bring people's trauma to the surface, whether they choose to be initiated or not.
Yeah, but we're talking about the peace we're bringing here. Yeah. And if we're talking about other people, all we're doing is ignoring the fingers that are pointing back at us right now. The best demonstration that we can give in this forum for people listening, rather than being another group that talks about where we're going. And I can tell you, I've sat in a lot of boardrooms that have had this conversation.
Totally.
Yeah, and been around and around and around. I go, oh, here we go again. Yeah. But my arrogance of saying, here we go again, is what's changed. Is the fact that I go, okay, I need to speak up, even if it's not very well done, right? So that we help people get permission, give themselves permission to start speaking, not from a solutions, we have the answer, that we're co-building an architecture, because this is supposed to be about architecture on the third day. I'm holding that strategy behind it. And if we believe that we've got some solutions, then we're leaving out the biggest part of the listeners' capability, being able to invite them into the conversation, not to add as in, oh, yes, I agree with Luke, or yes, I like what Nick says. We don't need any more likes. A person who leads from the heart is not doing it to be liked. That's that's number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, it's really interesting because it's like a microcosm of, we were talking in the green room earlier on, you take on the old world, and battle with that. We've got there's two parallel kind of things happening right now. There is an old existence, an old paradigm. There's a new one emerging, and I use the word chrysalis, right, to come out of the chrysalis. But I think what Luke's saying is right, is that there are things that keep us held to the dock, which happens to be trauma. And Julia, I sort of hear you saying, okay, but fine, but it's not an absolute thing where all the trauma has to go before you can start to be a heart-filled leader.
Isn't their idea of what trauma does? This is the difference. The old model, because I've got the counselling background and the therapeutic background of, when I first did my training, and there's processes and everybody's emerging, I went, and when I do that, I go, oh, something's gold is about to be spoken. And so people just want to know they're okay, number one. A lot of leaders are not going to jump ship. They're not going to embrace the heart. If they're going to be told, you're going to be taken on a trauma and we're going to take you off into the forest, not everybody has to do that. The ability to go to retreat, not to be healed, and you go to retreat because you're powering up, very different. When you're coming from a real clarity, and not everybody who has trauma, as you know from your therapeutic background, Luke, not everybody that has trauma has a depression. Some people, it just kickstarts them into leadership straight away.
Yeah,
and there's no room for them in that model of immersion.
I think there's a lot of nuance here, and I really want to land more of touch on the nuance of it. I really appreciate your fierce stance of like, let's not fucking loop in trauma or like wait to be healed in order to take action on our mission. That's not what I'm suggesting at all.
But you're the next generation. We had a whole generation of it.
Yeah.
Like, let's not repeat the same mistakes.
It's I think the idea is that we're not repeating it.
Yeah.
This is
the whole. How do you know if you've got no one on the outside? This is the beautiful part. There's no one on the outside looking in at the system that goes, this person, me, right? There's no one on the outside going, it's not about changing the existing capitalism. It needs, in order for the awakening process, for people being held, they need to be given compassion, not, oh, they're going to go through a trauma. How dare I tell them what they're going to have?
Let me land my plane and respond, because you're saying a lot of things that are not, like I feel like you're defining what I'm trying to share for me from your lived experience of being, kind of gone through a beautiful disillusionment around it and arrived in a place where you're regulated and you're like, I don't need to do that anymore. That's the journey that you've been on, and that's amazing. That's great. Let me kind of touch on this from my perspective and actually like fully express when I'm speaking into, because I find in a lot of these arenas, the lack of shadow work, the lack of trauma work is what creates the biggest distortion in the field. It's this idea that, you know, it's the stuff that's put under the rug. You don't need to shake out the rug every day, you know, and it's not defining, saying, hey, like, you know, you have to have some cathartic experience. I would never say what someone needs to do for their initiation. That's not up to me. But
let me
finish.
Trauma.
We do. If you're a human being on the planet, your human body, your nervous system is carrying some epigenetic memory. And the deeper you go into unlocking your nervous system, your DNA, you are going to touch on the ancestral history that's been given to you in this body. When you meet that trauma, you unlock what you're talking is power. When you get the power of your ancestors behind you, that's a whole nother level of force. You know, if you trace your lineage back to wherever, you know, and then there's the whole conversation of your Akash, of your journey as a soul, that some people bring in the trauma of their soul's experiences into this lifetime, not just their epigenetics, but the traumas that they survived as a soul. You know, I've seen this in my practice of people that have had such traumatic experiences in another incarnation that they're literally playing out the same loop in this lifetime. So what I'm talking about is such a deep level of self-responsibility to meet the hidden pieces that are operating in the background, so they're not influencing the choices that we're making. That's it. And I think what you're talking about is a resonant field of the soul existing as the soul without story. No, and they are simultaneous.
Well, no,
they can be
without story. I just said that the story is held outside. In other words, you have enough courage and conviction. You've been trained well enough. And this is the work I've been doing for a really long time now with leaders, is that we actually speak it in the moment. Like I spoke it before. I was aware and said that, you know, there's this vibrational shaking, right? And it's not because of incompetence or anything like that. It's because I've got the guts to express.
Truth is moving through you.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, no, I'm not. No, it's not, it doesn't have to be my truth. It's my arrogance that says it's my truth. When I'm not coming from arrogance, I'm also carrying, like you're saying, can be the lineage, it can be anything. But this need to name it can be, rather than just letting it pass and being able to have that capability. There's a lot of leaders that are very poised, ready for that. There are a lot of leaders ready and poised for that. And they're powerful, they're capable, and they will get this really, really fast. It means that the trauma presents in the moment and they speak it. And it doesn't need to go through a massive process because we're meeting it at that threshold in the moment. And we know that if it's not spoken, it doesn't contribute to the innovation space. It's not able to be able to add value to the conversation. Yeah. So
this is where we're in shared reality. It's fodder.
Yeah. But when we say we carry trauma and that's a belief and a paradigm that you're carrying, rather than listening to other people who go, maybe people don't. Have you even considered that there's a possibility outside the mythical journey that there are some people that are born without trauma, right? Even though the birth obviously experience is brutal in itself. But you know,
I think there's a wave of children coming like that. Because we're doing that work now. So we're not passing that trauma on to our little ones.
But I think from what I'm hearing, Jules, like the invitation, which I really appreciate, is to not be a movement, a community that use universals.
Yes.
So much so that it barricades the invitation of someone who might have a way of being a solutionary that is not even within our sort of ability to conceptualize right now. So to always be impeccable with our language and create the space for the most not the most embodied way, but for every person's version of how this might look. Yeah. And create a space where there's safety there. And I really relate to that and respect that, because when I was working in government as a commissioner, you know, universals all the time. This is how it is. And I was there as like a young entrepreneur that didn't have any of that dogma. And I was like, if you give me like a millionth of the funding that you're giving this organization, I'm going to create 100 times the impact. But they just did not believe that that was possible, you know, and their shared language and their shared terminology was so strong that the fight to have a voice in that took so much effort, rather than existing in a culture that allowed for that sharing to happen, and to just be open-minded to know that there might be solutions that we're not even present to ourselves. I think that that's really valuable.
Yeah. So, wow. Love the energy that is on this topic. And what the great thing is, here is an example of having, let's say, different beliefs based on different experiences. Luke, I'm all with you with regards to the epigenetic, multi-generational setup as well, and things that need to evolve from there. But on that note too, and having the respect and love for each other here, and what we are so passionate about, which is awesome, because we're all pointing at the same thing. In looking at solutions, as we sort of move towards landing this, technology is starting to play a big part. And so, you know, when we're talking about, you know, now perhaps heart and mind alignment, or however you want to describe it, I'm going to leave it to you. We have AI coming into the picture, a lot of controversial type discussions around that. You know, we have things measuring brain frequency, we have things measuring heart rate variability, and this is to help build awareness of the best state, I believe, to be in, to be able to perform at your best. So, and I think, Jules, you're coming from a point of, hey, you can feel the fire, but, you know, if you've connected in with yourself, even though the trauma is still playing its game, you know what the right thing is to do, and tap in, you know, and drop in and just move forward, be a leader. So Nick, I'm going to hand this one to you because I can see the hands up there. So
before we move the conversation into AI, because there's a total
quantum.
I actually just want to just take another moment to slow it down, because you know, just then I wanted to acknowledge what Jules was bringing to the conversation, but I also really want to acknowledge what Luke's bringing to the conversation. And I would actually love to create space for the consensus that I see exists in both of these perspectives to be bridged. So however I can support that process.
Yeah, I think it's valuable. Yeah, it's valuable. A little healthy friction can sense make, right? Because to me, this is counsel. Like someone, if we have a subjective perspective, or if we have lived experience or whatever, like there's wisdom in the room. I'm fully open to Jules's perspective, even if I'm like, because it takes time to actually unpack the details. Really? Oh, when you said that, you meant that, not what I assumed you meant, and you know, to actually meet the energy. I'm going to give it right back to you, Nicole. But the piece that I was really hearing from you, Julie, was like, and this is something that I foundationally orient in, even though I can speak in these, you know, I do speak in certain absolutes from what I've observed from life, and you know, holding space for thousands of people, like. It's a foundational understanding, and that's my understanding. I'm not saying that's how it is. I'm open to being wrong, but what I'm hearing is to have a healthy relationship with the mystery. Yeah. And this is the piece that I think bridges is like, you know, that's where emergence can happen. If we're not listening deeply, and we're in assumption, and we're putting limiters onto life, we can't listen to life's intelligence, and we're actually wants to inform the field. And so, you know, Nicole, I know that you're gonna weave this thread and bring a synthesis to help bridge these pieces, but I just wanted to speak into that it can, for me, even if I have strong opinions around it, those strong opinions survived after many dark nights of the soul, where I let go of all of my beliefs, and then they reform. I'm like, oh, this is still true after 7 of the, or 10 or 15 of these things. Cool. Maybe there's something to that, because it kept coming back after I dropped everything. And then also having the healthy mystery there around, you know, knowing that we don't know is a very healthy orientation to have, so that life, the intelligence of life, can actually be the dominant energetic that we're tracking. And how we sense make and how we draw from that is really important, because we are living into something that's never existed yet. It is something that we're all in discovery around, and I really want to just name that we're all in discovery, all of us.
Total. But there's also people who have been practicing this for a number of years already, right? So in other words, and that doesn't mean we know more, but it means that we have a piece that's valuable part of the conversation that may not be being considered. And as being around people who founded, systems thinking and inside the whole lot, the common issue is the blind spot is the system not being able to see itself. So all of our work constantly with what we do with transcendental leadership, constantly every single day, is for us to be able to see, right, what are we not hearing right now? What are we not available for right now? What really wants to speak right now? And then we shut up and we don't say a word until the next word has to be spoken.
What I find beautifully, in a way, ironic about the position, because we're holding a container right now for this conversation to happen, right? And so depending on the mix of the personalities, each of us energetically are going to assume a certain position in the conversation, and that's how it's going to unfold. And often in one conversation, you don't get access to witness someone's full multidimensionality. And I'm sitting here knowing Luke as, one of my most beloved brothers in the world. Luke is one of his art is absolutely incredible. Let me start there. His poetry, his art, his music, your capacity, Luke, to hear and listen to the subtleties in the silence and how you thread that, so masterfully and beautifully into your art form is second to none. And so your very embodiment of what Jules is speaking to, I would say you are, out of everyone I know, one of the most amazing demonstrations of this. And yet, in a conversation in community, we will hold different pillars depending on what a conversation is needed. And I think having a little context that I do with all of us here today, we've actually, and I know this is a big part of your work, which is another sort of piece of irony, Jules, that we are literally living out the very thing that we are, having a conversation about, even in the confines of this sort of small panel and conversation, which I think is so beautiful. So what I really want to bring home before I pass it back to you, Tommy, is I saw someone say on the group thread just before I think I stopped breathing in this conversation 15 minutes ago. Don't be afraid to try on that position, and see where that can progress and evolve a conversation, where it can progress and evolve a relationship, whilst knowing that you're allowed to change at any moment. You're allowed to assume a different role, a different perspective, a different position. The very intent of Global Unity Summit is to be in a never-ending conversation about what global unity means, because that is unity in itself. It's never-ending. And so, for what it's worth, from my humble perspective, I just wanted to acknowledge that what's actually played out is such a rich embodiment of the very thing that we're all speaking to and desiring.
With respect and love, all round. And this is the stuff that I think everyone can learn from, just having gone through the discussion over the last hour, to something that was real, and how we remain fiercely connected in want to fulfill a purpose of, bringing love to the planet. It's okay to have anger as long as it's clean anger as well, I think and believe. But having a Mediterranean heritage upbringing, it was like part of the course, right? But this is what's really cool about this, is the truth that came out during this last hour. It's awesome. I think we've probably run out of time to talk a bit about how technology and systemic change plays a part here, Nicole. That's probably a completely different chapter. Right? Yeah.
Completely shift topics. I'm sure we could pick it up.
Yeah.
But
next round. Yeah. Go on, Luke. But
just to weave, what everyone's feeling, what people felt through this is what's called what we call a contraction in the field. There's a little bit of a contraction, going on, and that contraction actually, when it's met, has the opportunity to evolve everyone's awareness. This is what Nicole's
It
speaking
means
to.
that
It's like,
we met an edge. You know,
yeah,
we were
exactly.
actually doing the greatest work in this, because when you meet that contraction edge point of tension, that's when we can actually, you know, move beyond it. I think it's epic.
Yeah, nice demo.
Live
I'll
demonstration.
guarantee I'll always bring authenticity to the place.
Oh,
I
awesome.
can't help myself. It's not so much that. I want to thank everyone, and because there'll be a lot of people that everybody wants it to be nice, and fierce gentility is fierce, right?
Yeah.
So anger is not necessarily anger; it's a fire, and
I'm with you.
Yeah, and as long as it's not annihilating the other human being in the process, right? It's just pressure that we must meet. We've got this outside pressure that's pushing up against pressure all the time, and if we don't build that muscle, there is no leadership. It's all nice, and we're all going to go on retreat, and and believe me, I've run many retreats, right? So I know how they work. You know, I should turn it around. I've got singing bowls everywhere, and you know, and all this sort of thing. But at the same time, I love watching this little chick doing the banging on this, going for it on the drums, and just completely losing herself inside the drum kit, because that's life, you know, being able to go, you know. And I must admit, I do have a concern, and this is, I'll throw this in, of this moving into the addiction of psychedelics, because we are the technology, we don't need it, right? If you want to do it, sure, do it recreationally, but make sure you're able to hold your consciousness. If you've got to take your mind out of the equation, you're telling your whole spirit you don't trust it.
This is a big conversation, Joey.
Yeah,
and Luke offered that so beautifully from that soul level.
I'm going to bring in my martini cocktail recipes next time.
Let's do it. I'm available.
So we're going to do a special edition where we all microdose. We come back together.
All wasted in their own way.
Yeah.
Tell me how you really feel when there's some psilocybin.
Well, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. There's no mask. A lot of years to remove the mask. Yeah,
that'll be an interesting interview to moderate. All right, so look, hey, final words, guys and gals. I'm not going to do the pronoun thing right here, right now. So for someone that is on the edge, they were curious, they've had a bit of a listen, they perhaps didn't understand all of it, but there's this calling in them that they could find a solution here. What first step should they take, and where can they find you? So we'll start with you, Jules.
I was going to let Luke take over. Be brave enough to stop long enough, take enough pause, and let that train of all that concern, it will meet you. You know, it's like a Big Mac truck, you know, it comes up, and be okay with it, letting it, you know, learning to get out of the way and letting it pass by so that you can stay in that out breath. Number two, you're not alone. There's millions of us that have been doing this work for short time, long time. It doesn't matter about the duration, but there's a lot of people available to hold the space for yourself, and also take responsibility for that space. You're there to participate and co-hold the space. You're not there for someone else to do it for you. So it's, for me, this one piece, it's time for that voice of, hey, you watch me, I'm prepared to make a mistake, right? And what people will perceive as a mistake, I don't, because this voice that will speak ushering itself through, and if it pushes up against stuff, then, you know, it's like, I can tell you there's a part of the body that goes, you know, all of that old programming, you just got to hold it but trust your heart. There's two things that if there was two key takeaways: learn to trust love, learn to trust the love in your heart, not the love of the other human being and what another human being can do for yourself. Trust the power of that heart's coherence deep, deep, deep at a soul level when the mind's out of the way. And just do whatever it takes to get that mind out of the way. Yes, there's faster ways of doing it. There's shorter ways. There's lots of ways. But more importantly, just know that, you know, whoever is that one person listening to this, that it doesn't have to be as traumatic as you might be thinking. It's usually the ego that's making it more traumatic than it actually needs to be. And it doesn't mean, it's very, really simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it is really, 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 really simple. Trust love and learn to trust as well. And that comes from within yourself. Yeah, just take the leap, everyone. We're there. Awesome. You know,
how do they find you? How do they find you, Julie?
At the moment, we've actually got a program coming up in 2 weeks, or next Monday actually, a container for a very small group of people that we'll do over 3 sessions, and it's our foundational stabilizer called Earth Point, where we literally take people into this 5-axis point, the umbilical cord connected with Indigenous heritage as well, but where you landed on this earth, and have an intimate connection and build a stabilizer from that place. And it's really beautiful work. So you can actually find that better on Linktree, and our Op Australia is the name. So
awesome. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Look forward to talking about Ikigai and Wu Wei and those other things next time. And the Satori, I think, was the other one. Luke, word of advice, taking that first step, and where can people find you? And then we'll close out with Nicole.
Invest in yourself. Invest in having really high level support and accountability. We all have blind spots. It's part of being a human being, and filling in the gap, getting vantage points into where we're not seeing ourselves or seeing parts of our choice making. It's really helpful to have that support, and it's not a limiter. It's an enhancement. So, you know, for me in my life, working with incredible mentors and lineage holders, there's so much richness when you can sit with someone who's lived through those experiences, and they can take you deeper into yourself, deeper into the truth of your mission, deeper into the hidden places that have gone unaddressed, deeper into the soul inhabiting more and more of the body. So if you want to live a soul-informed life, and you want the soul to be the main driver of your reality, invest in support. And use discernment. You know, people that have humor. If the spiritual teachers doesn't laugh, it's an important piece of it. And all my handles are the same. It's Luke Kohen, and it's Kohen with a K, Kohen. So on Instagram, on my website, it's all lukekohen.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. And Nicole, let love tear you apart. I'm going to hand it to you to close out.
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, what an epic conversation. You know, just this last reflection, where my mind was going in your shares, Jules and Luke, was I really do think, you know, and this is how it's designed, the most terrifying thing for any of us to really do and commit to is trust the love in our heart beyond all fear. that is the scariest thing to do, you know, and yet I think this is where we have the true capacity to perform miracles, to do the impossible, when it seems like there is no evidence, no logic, no rationale to support what you feel in your heart to be true. Can you still trust in the power of your heart? If it's someone, a mission, something, you know, a dream you have, no matter how the odds seem stacked against you, can you transcend the state of consciousness that relies on rationale and logic? And can you fully move into a paradigm where the heart leads beyond all reason? And I can tell you from my own experience, that will perform miracles. It performs the impossible, but it asks everything of you. And again, it's the paradox. It will ask everything of you, but the whole universe will become available to you simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so thank you. I truly feel I feel that in each of you, you know, through your own stories, your own wisdom, your own journey. And I'm so grateful that this was the final session of Summit. I just think that this was such a potent and powerful way to close out the last few days, and just, feeling a deep, deep gratitude.
Thank you.
Tommy and Luke. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice.
Okay.
Aloha.
Wow.
All righty.
Blessings.